Good evening, everyone. It's really great to be here. When Kesha first approached us about having Green Queen organize an event for Food and Beverage Tech Month, which was in July, but unfortunately Priscilla and I were not in the country, which is why we're having it tonight, I immediately thought of Priscilla. What I love about Green Queen is that it gives me the opportunity to really tell stories about people that are doing something very special, obviously in the wellness world. And the story I've wanted to tell for a really long time, and I've told parts of it, but never the full story, is Priscilla's story. This is a story of excellence, of passion, and of family, as you'll learn. And so I'm really, really, really pleased to be here in this very special fireside chat to sort of tell you the story of Raiz The Bar. And I will go on record and say that I think, by humble opinion, that it is the best chocolate in the world. That's why I feel very strongly about doing this interview and talking to Priscilla.
Wow, thank you so much. What an intro. Thank you so much, Kesha. Thank you so much, Sonalie. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here and taking time out of your busy schedules. That's a real honor to call us the best chocolate in the world. We have put some chocolate out on the tables for everyone to enjoy tonight. Is everyone getting some chocolate in?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Because it's one thing to talk about a product, but it's another thing to actually experience it firsthand. And our chocolate hopefully speaks for itself. Sonalie's been a really big fan of our chocolate for many years. I mean, she used to come when we used to do markets in Hong Kong. We did that for years and years, and he was such a huge supporter. We really wanted to get a feel and a test for the market and how the chocolate was going and things like that. So, yeah, it's really nice to have the support of everyone. So, thank you.
It's been a long journey, and one thing that's really special about this opportunity and why I wanted to do a one-on-one with you is I've known you for a really long time.
Yes, you have.
For almost 6-7 years now. So I've really seen the evolution. So I have a really special insight into the story because we've been friends and I've been following it, and we've had many talks over the years of where things were going to go. So it's a very special opportunity. So I'd really like to start by kind of telling people a little bit about how you came to the world of wellness. I met you in 2010. You were a raw food chef.
Yep.
You were inspiring people with your beautiful recipes. You are still today, I would say, one of the 2 best raw food chefs in Hong Kong, even though people are not as lucky as me to sample your food. So how did the wellness lifestyle kind of start for you? Were you always very healthy? Did you always drink green juice every day? How did you get there?
So I grew up with my sister, who's also here over there in Sydney, Australia. And that's okay. Oh, okay. Sorry. So my sister's here as well tonight, Rachel, and we grew up in Sydney, Australia. She's also my business partner, and we basically, we grew up like everybody else. I mean, there was no special diet. It was meat, potatoes, and all the other good stuff at the time. And it wasn't until I had my first son, when he was pretty much a newborn, that I had really stepped it up with my eating and all the rest of it. But prior to that, I kind of did eat clean, but I just wasn't as clean as I was after I had my first child, or during that pregnancy. And then so then it just sort of evolved from there. I mean, I studied at through 2 different academies, and then I was just really into it so much so that I wanted to educate people and just help people along the road of a cleaner lifestyle. But at the time in Hong Kong, there wasn't any products. Nobody was manufacturing like any kind of really super clean foods or anything like that. There was nothing, you know that.
Absolutely, and I mean that's something we're going to get into later, and why I think this story is so important, because Hong Kong is definitely not on the top of the list for where to start a wellness product brand. So we definitely will come to that. But so when I met you had just started Authentic Food,
yes.
Which is the company Facebook page is certainly still known as Raiz The Bar by Authentic Food. wonderful name, and you were very much on the raw side of things.
Yes.
And you were sharing your recipes, you were teaching people, you were doing cooking classes that were always full, lots of workshops. And that was really the beginning of Hong Kong's love affair with raw, vegan, wellness. I mean, this was when this lifestyle was on the fridge.
Right.
There were a few people, but it certainly wasn't the world that it is today, globally or in Hong Kong.
Exactly.
And actually, when I met you, you were also a music teacher for children. Is that right?
Yes. Actually, when I came to Hong Kong, I had a business called Music Promotion. So there's something not a lot of people know about. But I love kids. I absolutely love children and music. So that was sort of something that I had been doing before and came here and was doing that here. But then the food thing kind of took off, I guess, as an evolution from me just creating the foods, my students, parents getting really excited about it, wanting me to make some food for them, and it just kind of evolved from there. I mean, it was actually a very simple process where I was just teaching music to these beautiful children, and then they just wanted to try some of my food. And then I guess it just kind of started there. I mean, that was...
So the parents wanted to learn about what you were cooking.
Yeah, they were interested in what I was doing, even though I was teaching their kids music at the time. Yeah.
So that's how it started. And so for those of you who don't know, Raiz The Bar is a raw chocolate. And I think we should kind of define what that means in the world of chocolates.
Yeah.
So obviously raw food is a type of eating lifestyle where you do not consume foods that have been heated above 45 degrees Celsius. There's an argument of 45 degrees, but that's usually the accepted number. And so raw chocolate is not, the cacao beans are not toasted.
Exactly, so we don't roast our cacao. So it's unroasted. So I've actually got, excuse me, I just put up an article actually on my website about raw responsibility, because there's a lot of raw chocolate that's kind of taking off in the market. But I think that the term raw gets used kind of loosely. If you look at the definition of raw, it's like unprocessed, but to actually get raw chocolate, it has to go through a certain process. And I'm actually very transparent about that process. It needs to go through fermentation. It needs to go through drying. And the drying has to happen, like Sonalie said, at lower temperatures. But what actually happens with the drying is that it's got to be taken up to 70 degrees in order to kill some of the pathogens and bacteria and mold and things like that. And a lot of this isn't disclosed in the sort of the raw chocolate community, because I guess, either some people are asking questions, but it's not like it's out there right now.
But it's a huge problem. Greenwashing, wellness washing,
right. Like you call
how to read a label.
Exactly, you call it raw, but we need to educate consumers. And I think as a responsible chocolate maker, or trying to be responsible chocolate makers, we want to change that. Like, we want to let people know the process of how we make our chocolate. It is bean to bar, so there's fermentation, there's drying, there's winnowing, there's conching and stone grinding. So there's all these processes. So getting back to what your question was about the raw, it is raw in the sense of it is pure chocolate. It is raw in the sense of it's being, the whole process is low temperature. But it's not raw in the sense that it has been processed, and all chocolate has been processed. So when people say, my chocolate's being handmade and all the rest of it, that's beautiful, and yes, it has been, and we handmade our chocolate too, but in order to get to that point, it's got to pass through a lot of different hands, and it does have to go through machinery in order to get to that point. So I just want people to, I want a transparency there. I want to be able to, explain to people, educate people. I guess that's because that's my background, is education. I love letting people know how it all happens. And so that's kind of what we want to do, is just be more transparent in the industry. But yes, it is a raw chocolate, but I think people have to be responsible and define their own definition of raw when it comes to chocolate.
And certainly in Hong Kong, where there is absolutely no regulation. For people who don't know this, Hong Kong is a market that has no truth in advertising laws. It has no organic food regulation. So it is actually fine for people in the market, and they do, to write organic on their label. Where in Europe or in the US or now in Australia, you would get prosecuted if you use the word organic without a certification label. In Hong Kong, that is actually not the case. So it's even harder here. There's even more kind of greenwashing that's allowed because there's so little regulation.
Yeah, and you touched on a really good point. I mean, with the organic, we decided to step it up again and actually fly the guys in USDA organic and Australian certified organic. So we wanted to get both. And Australian certified organic is even more rigorous than USDA organic.
That's right.
So we did that, and we also, that's actually quite a rigorous process. We've also been audited by, 5-star hotels as well. And on top of that, we've got our paleo certification, our vegan certification. Not because we're saying you have to be this or that, but because we want people to know that we're serious and we've been transparent in our processes to get to the chocolate bar that you hope you love.
No. I mean, I think people, there's a lot of talk, and I think it's funny, but you have people now saying, oh, organic. Well, that's who cares about organic or organic labels are lying and etc. But I very much disagree with that, because I think that you have to draw the line somewhere. And organic certification, is it perfect? No. Can you have a product that's organic and not healthy? Yes. Can you have a product that's organic and not ethically grown? Yes. But at the end of the day, organic is a benchmark. And in order to get a USD organic certification or an EU organic certification, or in Australia, there are 2 Australian labels, ACO and Mettā, you need to actually have a third-party auditing process that happens.
Yes.
And in Hong Kong, there are less than 5 businesses that have USDA organic certification. There's a mushroom grower, there's Evergreens Republic, the aquaponics farm, and then I think there's one other food product. But so this is a very big step.
It is, and it's exciting for Hong Kong. I mean, we hope that more food manufacturers, they start manufacturing more foods here, they start manufacturing more products, and that is happening. That's sort of been happening extensively over the last 5 years, and we've just watched an explosion happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I mean, this is a very difficult place to manufacture a food product. I mean, you've got difficulty with rent. That's number one. Not only is it expensive to rent a space in Hong Kong, but it is actually quite difficult to get a food factory license, which is the regulation in order to produce food that is legally able to be sold commercially. And obviously, I remember a few years ago when you were having trouble getting the food factory space, and so that's why you couldn't kind of build the production.
Exactly. I mean, the FEHD was really cracking down at that time.
The Food and Environmental Hygiene Department.
Yeah, so even in markets and things like that, people that are selling things that don't actually have a food factory license, they can get themselves into a lot of trouble. So we wanted to do it properly.
And just so we're clear, I would say over 60% of what you get in markets, locally crafted food, is not made in a food factory licensed kitchen.
Yes.
So you've got that problem. So it's hard to find space. It's expensive. It's hard to get a food factory license. It can take 6 months to a year to get that license. We looked into it, and we've had this conversation many times. Also, it's very difficult to find quality staff. This is a conversation we've had in terms of people that are trained to make food.
Yes.
It's not considered the most glamorous or it's not something that the local population is looking to get into.
Right.
In the same way that you have people in Brooklyn or in London, in Australia, who really want to make food. This artisanal food movement is not so huge. It's not as respected. Yeah. So it's hard to find that passion for ingredients.
It's growing. I mean, it's just growing. It's not as it's certainly nowhere near as big as what it is in Australia or the States or the UK, but it is growing. And like I said, I really hope that there are more people that start to manufacture and start to get some serious certifications out here as well. And I think it is going to go that way. I think it is going to grow that way. But like you said, it's not an easy path. I mean, my sister and I have gotten up against a lot of challenges with it. But having said that, it is something that is, if you can get past the hurdles, it's something that's very worthwhile doing. I mean, we're a family-owned and operated business. We don't have any investors in our business.
And I want to talk about the family aspect.
Yeah.
You're a very devoted mother and wife, and we need to talk about how you balance that. But going back for a second to how difficult it is to do food products in Hong Kong, one of the big problems is obviously ingredients.
Yes.
We are not an agricultural city. I mean, it's changing, and we have some great organic farms, but it's difficult. And so I really want to talk to you about your bean to bar and where you went to source the cacao beans, and how did that happen? How did you get to the Indonesia?
Yeah, great question. So we just, I guess for me, it was when I had gone down to Bali, I had done a tour actually through, this was with Elena Love's Culinary Academy.
Okay.
So anyway, I found her academy, did that down in Bali for over a month, and that's when I got introduced to the farms down there, and it's actually a co-op down there. And it's just it's a whole conglomerate of lots and lots of different farms where the farmers actually bring their beans down and they are able to get, paid proper wages for, that's the problem. Like, I mean, out there at the moment, these farmers aren't getting paid what they should be paid for their cacao. And that was something really important to us, was the ethical aspect of it. Not just the sustainability, but the ethical aspect of it as well.
And that is on your label.
Yeah.
Ethically sourced. So this is something that's very important to you. You know the farmers that are growing your beans.
Well, we don't know all the farmers, to be fair, because there's so many of them. But some of them, like a few of them, we've certainly met. But definitely, it's a co-op. So it's lots of farmers that come down, and because it's an American-run co-op, it's all USDA organic and certified and everything. It's actually a really, they do farm visits and things like that down there as well. To see it, but it's a really great. It's for us. It's just really great that there's lots of farmers that can bring their beans down, and we know that they're getting paid proper wages for it. I mean, that's the end of the story. For us, that's ethically sourced. And the other part of ethically sourced is making sure that there's no child trafficking involved as well, because that is absolutely rampant in the cacao industry. Unfortunately, there's a lot of child labour and things like that. And while a lot of these kids, they grow up on the farms, so yes, they are kind of, in and out of the plantation. I think, to be responsible, we have to make sure that that's not part of what we're, promoting here.
And the American company actually has a fair trade certification? Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is the other part. People talk about organic, but then there's also the ethical, the fair labor, the making sure that no one is being exploited to make your chocolate.
And fair trade is fair enough. Pardon the pun, but yeah, fair trade is fair enough. But it's not enough for us. Like, as a family, we actually wanted to go down and to see the operation ourselves, and we do that all the time. Like, we do sporadic visits down there just to.
And it's great you share it with your audience. I mean, that was definitely a big part of the beginning of your journey.
Exactly.
Was sharing your visits to the cacao farms and showing you in the shaded plants.
Yeah, exactly.
So is Indonesia a really wonderful place to grow cacao?
It's a great place to grow cacao. I mean, we love supporting what's going on in Asia. However, it's still a natural, it's a natural food, so it's obviously, and it grows all around the equator. So that's where you'll find all the cacao plantations are right around the equator. But sometimes they don't have enough cacao, and so sometimes they get some of their cacao from Peru. And again, we have to trace that back and make sure that it's ethically sourced, sustainably grown, and all the rest of it. Our family hasn't made a trip out to Peru yet, but certainly we do the trips down to Indonesia. Most of our cacao beans come from Indonesia, but again, transparency is key. So to let our consumers know that, sometimes they have droughts, sometimes it can be.
Well, I mean, I was just reading an article about coffee the other day, which grows in a lot of similar parts to cacao. They're often grown together.
They do.
And unfortunately, we may face no more coffee by 2080 because of climate change issues.
Yep.
So cacao has that same problem.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting you say that too, because So the different fruit trees that are intercropping, the way that cacao grows is intercrop with other fruit trees, and often those fruit trees, whether it be coffee, whether it be fruit, banana, mangosteen, whatever, it actually affects the taste of our chocolate. So sometimes we can walk into our factory and it smells like, I don't know, coffee, tobacco, banana. It's really bizarre, but that's what makes it so cool, and that's, being able to do that.
That's a great segue into the whole bean to bar concept and the whole artisanal chocolate concept.
Yeah.
So chocolate being like wine, being like what coffee is now, and really having its own flavor profile. So could you explain a little bit more about bean to bar and what does that really mean? Because I think you are one of the few people that's actually doing real bean to bar.
Well, I think, with bean to bar, there's lots of different things that affect the flavour. For example, there's the terroir, there's the climate, there's just a whole bunch of things, genetics. I mean, it really all affects the bean. And then to be able to sort of get those beans, the farmers will ferment them, and they'll ferment them in these wooden sort of slats. And usually they ferment them in a pile on banana leaves in a heap. What that does is it actually exceeds the temperature over a raw standard, let's say. So the way that they keep the temperatures low is by keeping them on these wooden slats and thinly laid out. And then they take the inside temperature of it. The way that it ferments is because, has anybody ever seen like a cacao pod and opened it and sort of, no, okay. Wish I had one to show you guys, because it's really beautiful. There's a really sweet kind of white mucilage, like a fruit inside. And in order to ferment, you need one of two things. You need either salt or sugar. So the sugar in the fruit actually ferments the cacao bean inside. And if you've ever tasted an actual real raw cacao bean, not turned into a chocolate bar, but it tastes like a blanched almond. It's purple. It does not taste anything like chocolate whatsoever, which I found quite amazing. This was fascinating years ago when I first tried it, yeah. But I really liked the white fruit around it. It was kind of like a lychee type thing. It was delicious. And apparently a lot of the animals, they eat that white mucilage and then they spit the actual cacao bean out. Not our cacao beans, but they do that. So then from there, they then, once it's been fermented, which takes a few days, probably about 3 or 4 days, then they need to be cleaned up and dried. So then the beans get dried in these big dryers.
How long does it take to dry the beans?
Great question. So usually it takes, well, it's quite quick actually. It's a few hours to actually dry the beans. And let me explain how this works, because this is interesting. In some countries, they lay the beans out in the sun to dry, okay, which is great, but there's always been that question in my mind. Okay, a lot of these countries are third world countries, and what's happening to the beans while they're laying outside on the ground? Obviously, there's rodents and things like that, and I have heard all kinds of stories. But what I like about our beans is that when I sit down with an exec chef from a hotel and we're talking about how we're going to work together, is that our beans aren't left out to potentially mold, to potentially gain pathogens and all sorts of bacteria. What happens with our beans is that they go into a big dryer. It's almost like a roaster, but it's not. It kind of looks like a washing machine. And they all go in there and then they dry them, and they have to dry them at, like I said before, 70 degrees centigrade. I'm not sure what that is, Fahrenheit, but in any case, they go in there and then they come out a few hours later and they're done. They check the core temperature of the bean is below 45 degrees centigrade.
So the outside of the bean may hit 70, but the core remains raw.
Yes, which is interesting because a lot of dehydration methods, the longer you dehydrate raw foods, let's say, is the more potential for mold. So basically, if you raise your dehydrator, but as long as you check the core temperature, often the core temperature is very different from the outside temperature. And because it has a certain amount of liquid in it, it's not affecting the center of the bean. So that's it. I know, I like all the...
And I think I visited your factory when you were just waiting for your conching machine, because you want to actually, you get the beans in that dried state.
Yeah, and then what happens?
So then what?
Well, they winnow. First of all, they winnow down.
So what does winnowing
So
mean?
winnow is when they crack the beans. They will crack the beans on the farm down.
Okay.
They winnow. Then we get the beans, which are all broken up, and then we take those beans and we put them into our huge stone grinder. And basically it takes about 4 days. Is it 4 days? About 4 days. Is it 3 to 4 days? Yeah, 3 days, does the same. 3 days. So it's about 3 days to actually liquefy the chocolate and create couverture. And when there's nobody else doing that in Hong Kong, which I was really surprised about. But there's
Definitely a landmark. I remember you saying that.
Yeah, it's just like that. Being able to do that in small batches is so exciting because a lot of the chocolate people try is from big industry, and you lose a lot of the nuances and the flavor profiles of like the bean. You just do. You won't get the same flavor.
So for chocolate novices, because obviously you are an expert, but most of us are not.
I'm still learning.
So couverture is essentially, so when you go to a fancy chocolatier and you buy truffles, that is not necessarily a bean to bar chocolate. That is, couverture are large blocks of cacao that has been roasted and then conched and essentially there's no way to guarantee kind of exactly where the beans are from, and that's the chocolate commodity market in big commercial food.
Yeah, it's got all the refined sugar. It's usually got child trafficking.
This is why it's so incredible. When we were at the factory, Tracy and I visiting you and Rachel, when we just opened, and I understood that you are making the block, which you make your own chocolate out of it, but then you also provide that block for chocolate makers.
Yeah, exactly. We provided the block for chocolatiers. So what I'm not able to create like really super amazing. There's some incredible chocolatiers out there that can create amazing chocolates. I mean, I've played around with it before, but certainly nowhere near to the caliber that they can do. They're artists. They're so clever. I mean, these chocolatiers in hotels and restaurants and things like that, they're so clever. But all we want to do is just create amazing couverture, which is, like you said, Sonalie, the blocks of chocolate, aside from our bar line, which you're all trying tonight. But we also have the couverture blocks, and that's where chefs can just, melt it down. They can re-temper it after we tempered it, melt it all down, and just create their own creations, which is really cool.
And that's what's really kind of deal breaking about Raiz The Bar. You literally are raising the bar of couverture. And I really do. How many other people in the world are making this kind of really, really high quality bean to bar couverture and then giving it to like people like the Mass Brothers in Brooklyn? So I'm sure you all know that a lot of the artisanal chocolate movement started a few years ago, especially in places like Brooklyn, and you have the famous Mass Brothers. But upon further research, they are using couverture, and they actually had a huge media controversy because they're selling these artisanal bean to bar bars, and it turns out they're using couverture, and we don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for them, but certainly, there was a big kind of meltdown with all of that. And again, it's the transparency. It gets back to the consumer education, the transparency. I mean, you can say you're a bean to bar maker, and then on the side you're melting down some color vinyl, some Valrhona or whatever. I mean, is it ethical? No, I don't think it is. But it's not my business what they do. But as far as what we do, with our couverture is we just want to make it as ethical as possible, but also be able to provide it to the restaurants and the hotel chefs, and that's exciting just to get to see what they actually make with it. We love doing it.